What is the cheapest city in Canada to buy a house? I'm going to let you know on this video, but also the second most affordable city on this list also has one of the highest household incomes in Canada. Can you guess what city it's going to be? See if you can figure it out before the end of this video. Because yes, it is true. You can have high household incomes and low house prices in the same Canadian city. Hey there, and welcome back to Bald Prairie Real Estate. This is the weekly news recap where I go through the most interesting Canadian real estate related news topics, give you my thoughts and opinions on it. My name is Matthew Pfeifer, real estate agent in Regina, Saskatchewan. That's my trusted assistant, 𝗵𝗫𝗲𝗬𝗲. This week, we're going to be going through Canada's GDP numbers. They're not as good as they look. The low vacancy rates in Canada continue to get lower. We're going to be talking about a recent survey showing homebuyers are looking at more non-traditional forms of home ownership. Going to be exploring the cost, the true hard numbers, how much it actually costs to build a house in Canada, and we're going to reveal the cheapest city in Canada to buy a house. But of course, we're going to start off with another one of my terrible bad dad jokes. Why did the vampire not attack Taylor Swift? It's because she had bad blood. That's a Swiftie joke I had to get in. My wife is a massive Swiftie, so of course I had to get one of those in. If you got a terrible joke I can use in a future episode, put it in the comments below. Let's get into this week's Canadian real estate news. As I'm editing this here, I realized I forgot to talk about Matilda's favorite part. Yes, she actually really likes going to showings. So if you're buying a house in Regina, you're moving to Regina, of course, I would love to help you out. But if you're not moving to Regina and you're looking to buy a house somewhere else in Canada, don't worry, I've got you covered because I've got a fantastic network of agents across the country that I can get you paired up with to help you find that perfect house. So if you look in the description of this video, there's gonna be a link to my calendar where you can book me in for a call. I'm gonna call you, learn about what's important to you in a house and an agent, and then get you paired up with that perfect agent. Sorry, Matilda can't come for the showings for that one. Start at the top by talking about Canada's GDP numbers, and they came in higher than expected. With a 1% increase in the GDP, not only was that higher than expectations, but it also reverses the previous quarter's slight decline in GDP, meaning Canada technically avoids a recession because you need 2 quarters of negative growth in a row for it to be considered a recession. Now, that is offset though because Canada's population has increased about 3% in the same quarter, meaning that per capita, Canada's GDP continues to decline. It has been now, I believe, about the better part of 2 years in a row that we've seen Canada's GDP per capita declining, meaning that if you are not feeling as rich as you used to be, well, there's a reason for that because per person, Canadians are not getting wealthier, they're actually getting poorer. But as you can see in the headline of this very article, the rate cut talks are back off the table. It was 3 weeks ago, the hot jobs numbers came in, rate cuts off the table. Last week, we see the inflation numbers coming in a little bit better than expected. Rate cuts are back on the table. And then this week, we've got the new GDP numbers, better than expected, rate cuts off the table. So that, of course, continues to swing back and forth. I'm still sticking with my prediction that we're not going to see rate cuts before June of this year. And if you want to know what else I predicted for the Canadian real estate market in 2024, I'll put a link to that video in the description of this video below and one of those pop-up cards right here so you can go directly to that video. Next up, we're talking about Canada's rental vacancy rate, which hit a new all-time low. This report comes out of RBC. They've been tracking vacancy rates across Canada and it is now at 1.5%. That is ridiculously low. A balanced rental market is considered between 5 and 10%. So obviously, we are absolutely nowhere near that. Of course, anybody who's looking to rent a place knows how hard it is to find something to rent right now. And we've been talking ad nauseum on this channel how much rent has gone up. We saw when last year only 40,000 purpose-built rentals were completed in the entire year for 2023. And we of course saw Canada's population increase by well over 1 million people. And a large percentage of that, actually the lion's share of that population increase in Canada, was temporary workers and students. Those, of course, are not going to be people that are probably going to be buying houses. They're going to be looking for rentals. And that, of course, is what we're seeing in the rental market, driving up rent prices, driving down vacancy rate, and making it very hard and unaffordable to find a place to live in Canada right now. RE/MAX recently released a poll talking about alternate forms of home ownership. This I thought was a really interesting poll. And of course, it's not perfectly scientific, but it does give you kind of a gauge of the temperature for home buyers. And we're seeing more home buyers looking at what they're considering non-traditional methods of purchasing or owning a home. And I thought this was interesting because this respondents was 32% are now looking at non-traditional forms of ownership. That's up from 17% only just a couple of years ago. So this includes things such as buying a property as a rent to own. That was the highest percentage at 22%. At 21% was those looking to buy a house with a non-spouse family member. And then that 17% was those that were looking to buy a house that had the ability to rent out a portion of that house. And I talked about it in my 2024 predictions video, again, link in the description below, that I expect this is going to be one of the hot products in the Canadian real estate market this year, properties that have rental potential, whether they have a full regulation basement suite or a laneway suite, or they have the potential to add that. I can see both of those being very appealing to buyers, and I see it in my own market, buyers looking for that. And sometimes that property that doesn't have the built-in suite but has the potential to do that, that is even more appealing to buyers because they can put in that sweat equity, build that laneway suite or build that basement suite themselves, and they're gonna save on the cost instead of buying one that's already completed. And that allows them to build equity in the house. And then of course, it reduces their cost of ownership when they have a rental suite in there to help with that monthly mortgage payment. Now let's talk about mortgage delinquency, and this is specifically Scotiabank's mortgage delinquency rates. The main focus of this article wasn't actually mortgage delinquency, it was Scotiabank talking about how they're tying other products to mortgages to entice people to come to Scotiabank as part of their mortgage. But what I thought was really interesting when digging through this article was looking at Scotiabank's mortgage delinquency, because that is an important leading indicator for those that are struggling to pay their mortgage. They're going to become delinquent on the mortgage before they actually have to go through that foreclosure or power of sale process. And those words often get used interchangeably, but they're absolutely not. They're two very different processes. I'm working on a video right now talking about the differences between foreclosure, power sale, whether those are actually really good deals or not. So make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss that video when it comes out. This is the most recent data from Scotiabank, and their mortgage delinquency rate was at 0.2%, up from the previous 0.6%. I expect this to continue to increase as we see more and more renewals come up with higher interest rates, and people will struggle once they have to pay those higher interest rates. But remember, pre-pandemic, the mortgage delinquency rate was about 0.35%. So we're still well below even pre-pandemic levels. The United States right now running at about 3% on mortgage delinquency rate. And before their housing crash in 2008, at one point, those variable rate mortgages was seeing a 35% delinquency rate. Scotiabank's right now on their variable rate products is 0.25%. Massive difference between the two. But of course, as I said, I do expect this to increase. And there's been a lot of talk about once people have to renew into these higher interest rates, that of course is going to put a lot of financial stress on homeowners, forcing them to have to sell. Maybe they don't qualify for that mortgage, or once they do even qualify for that mortgage, they're not going to be able to make the payments. But let's just quickly talk about this for a second here, because while it's all over the news, I think it's going to end up being a lot more hype than reality. We saw last year about 1 million Canadians renew the mortgage. And of course, all of those would have been in higher interest rates than they were previously. And we've seen this idea that there's this massive wave of people that have to renew the mortgage. I've seen headlines, 50%, 60% of people have to renew the mortgage in the next couple of years. Well, 1/5 of all mortgages, 20%, renew each and every single year. So that 1 million last year was a little under 20%. 2024, we're going to see about 21, 22% of mortgages have to renew. And then in 2025, it's a little higher again, about 23 to 25%. But still, again, the numbers sound really big. 50% of mortgages renewing in the next 2 years. That's typical. Those that are going to have to renew those mortgages this year would have purchased a home in most likely 2019 or potentially earlier. And of course, next year, 2020 and earlier. Since 2019, home prices nationally, and you guys know I don't like using national stats, but we are for the sake of this argument and conversation here, nationally home prices are up 30% since 2019, meaning that the vast majority, basically all of these homeowners, are going to have a significant amount of equity in their homes. They're not going to be underwater when they go to renew. It also buys them a lot of options, flexibility, and time when they go to renew their mortgage. They can potentially re-extend that amortization to reduce those payments because of how much equity they have in the house. that will reduce those monthly payments. It doesn't get you any further ahead, but it does reduce the monthly payments. If they are going to have to sell the house because of how much equity they will have in the house, they do have that luxury to kind of sit and wait things out and look for an offer that they want that makes them happy. And most likely it's going to be significantly higher than what they paid for the house. So if you're banking on this big wave of distressed sellers being forced to sell their property because of the renewing at high interest rates, I think you're going to be rather disappointed. This was a really interesting report from the Altus Group about the cost to build houses and apartments in Canada. I really like this report because they've analyzed actual construction projects. These are not estimates. This is actual data from real projects that have been completed. But I have to preface this with a whole bunch of disclaimers, and they've got them listed in their report themselves. And I will link this report so you guys can dig through it yourselves. It's a really good one. Now, what they're looking at here is just hard costs. That doesn't include a whole host of things. I actually have to look down at all the things they've excluded in the cost here so I don't forget them. And there's more than what I have on the list here, but they haven't included land, financing, marketing, legal fees, taxes, zoning and redevelopment costs, permits, or any sort of profit at all. As you can see from the chart, it varies across the country, but for a single family home, you're basically starting at $150 a square foot, going up to about $250, and in some cases slightly higher. Again, that's just the hard costs, not including all of the exclusions, which are going to add up very quickly. If you're looking at building an apartment, which would be, of course, important for purpose-built rentals, you're basically starting at $250 a square foot and working your way up from there. Now, this next little screenshot I'm going to put up here is from data used for this Altus report, but I stole it from Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it now. And it's really interesting. They're looking at the cost of building an apartment in Toronto, and from the last 10 years, what has been the biggest contributor to cost increases. Let's go through them. At the bottom was land. That's gone up 34%. Soft costs and financing have both gone up 50%. Hard costs, all your materials, gone up 122%. HST is up 221%. And government charges are up 248%. So the very same governments that say we need to ban this and tax this to make Canadian housing more affordable are the very same governments that have turned Canadian real estate into their own personal cash cow. And this is all stripes of government, all levels of government have all realized that Canadian real estate is a really good way for them to make profit. That's exactly what this is. They are the ones that are profiting, in some cases the most, in most cases the most, off of Canadian real estate. It is the very same politicians that have demonized foreign buyers and investors and everybody else except themselves. They're not willing to admit that that's what they've turned the Canadian real estate market into, their own personal cash cow. And don't even get me started on CMHC, because since 2015, the federal government has stripped out billions, yes, billions of dollars from the very company that is supposed to be backstopping Canadian mortgages. If you want me to do a video on that, because I think that's a scandal that nobody is talking about, let me know in the comments below. Now let's look at a 𝗬𝗂𝗃 report about the cheapest places in Canada to buy a house. Okay, so you've waited this long, I gotta give you the answer here. And if you've been a fan of this channel for a while, you might be seeing this one coming. The cheapest place in Canada to buy a house is either the Prairies or the East Coast. Most specifically, St. John, New Brunswick has the lowest total cost, so benchmark purchase price, while the Prairies have some of the lowest costs and also the highest household incomes, along with some very affordable costs of living. This is a really interesting article to go through. While St. John, New Brunswick has the lowest benchmark price at $278,000, they also have a much lower median household income, and they saw one of the fastest price appreciations over the last 5 years, beating out Vancouver and Toronto. And of course, this wouldn't be a Bald Prairie Real Estate episode if I didn't find a way to talk about my hometown here in Regina, Saskatchewan, which was number 2 on this list, the benchmark price of $301,000, and it saw the smallest appreciation of price increases across all the different cities that they looked at 8.6%. Okay, so the purchase price to buy a house in Regina is cheaper, but I've seen a lot of people say in my comment section, yeah, but the cost of living is way more than any other city. Well, again, according to this report, that's actually not true. Regina kind of stacks up near the middle and saw the slowest price increases of this market basket measure that's basically kind of a CPI for these individual cities for their cost of living. But then of course, Regina must have really low wages. I've seen that a lot in the comments below. There's no high paying jobs in Regina, except that Regina has one of the highest median household incomes at $106,000. That's higher than Vancouver and Toronto, which are both about $96,000 respectively, and higher than the Canadian median of $98,000. And that makes, with some quick napkin math, when you take the purchase price of a house in Regina, $15,000 down payment is all you're going to need. Your monthly mortgage cost will make up about 19% of the average household's pre-tax income. If you increase that to a 20% down payment, so $60,000, then you're going to be looking at less than 15% of the average family's pre-tax income to afford to own a house in Regina, Saskatchewan. So yes, you can have one of the cheapest house prices in Canada combined with affordable cost of living and one of the highest median household incomes in the entire country, all in one city. And yes, I know this probably sounds like an advertisement for Regina, and I'm proud to be from Regina. I'm proud that I work in an affordable real estate market. I talk about it a lot, but it's true also across the prairies. This is not just a Regina thing. You see the same kind of metrics in Winnipeg and Saskatoon, Edmonton, and even Calgary, which has seen house prices increase a lot. The prairies combine housing affordability with some of the highest household median incomes in Canada. And of course, as I'm sitting here editing this up, I realized I forgot to give you the answer to the poll question like I said I was, and that is the city that saw the most price appreciation as a percentage in Canada over the last 5 years was Moncton, New Brunswick. Yes, Moncton, Brunswick beat out Vancouver, Toronto, and every other city in Canada for the fastest appreciating house prices in Canada. That wraps up another week's news. If you love this video, please give this video a like. If you haven't subscribed already, subscribe to Bald Prairie Real Estate so you don't miss my upcoming videos. Leave me some comments below so we can chat with you guys in the comment section below. And as always, thanks very much for watching.